Hey, everybody. Welcome back to part two of Everything is Cinema, the 1960s. And then we'll move on to the 70s. And it works like that. Today's going to be focusing on something we're going to do that's a little different. You're going to watch a documentary and you're going to take a quiz. Oh, yeah, I know, quizzes. But you'll have plenty of time to do this. You'll be able to watch the film, it's a documentary, and you'll have essentially 24 hours to do the quiz and get it in. If you're late, you don't get anything. The quiz is going to be worth what the papers are worth, which is 10 points. So no papers this week, but there's going to be a quiz. I'm going to give you guys a day or two to watch this film, and then I'm going to do the quiz. And you got to watch it the next probably 3 days, do the quiz in 1 day, and we'll be done with it. But here's the deal. You won't be able to take the quiz, wait for me to tell you what the quiz is, and then watch the movie because you won't have time. I don't believe. Anyway, if you want to get around the rules, go ahead, have at it. But I think you might enjoy the documentary. It's called Easy Rider: Raging Bulls, and it's defining an era of Hollywood they called the last golden age of Hollywood films. Now, you might think we're in a golden age right now. We aren't. This is kind of a cold, cruel world we're living in. I mean, we're all isolated after all, and the idea of the auteur director has essentially come to an end. Unless you're a foreign director or a way indie director that doesn't get any money from Hollywood, the auteur director is essentially sort of dead right now. And what I mean by auteur, it's one of those French words again. Remember how I told you the French created most of our cinematic language? It simply means the author of their own work. And I told you during the French New Wave, people were writing for a influential film magazine called Cahiers du Cinéma, and they brought up this theory of the auteur, and they were assigned to directors like Alfred Hitchcock, Orson Welles. They were authors of their own work, meaning they had a personal, visual, emotional, contextual stamp on their films that you could spot their films standing apart from, say, the cookie cutter factory of the Hollywood studio films. And some of them were auteurs by they didn't even know they're auteurs. They just had a personal stamp, a personal style that was so strong, people could relate to their films. They'd look forward to their films. You could watch a Hitchcock film. You could watch Orson Welles. You could watch John Ford, Howard Hawks. You could watch these films without knowing who directed it and probably discover who directed it. The French thought that was really important, to be an author of your own work. Imagine that. It's hard to find that in Hollywood now because the authors are many. It's a collective screenplay writings. There's millions. There's a lot of writers. Some writers are doing the dialogue. Some writers are doing the action, et cetera, et cetera. The visuals are all very similar. Lots of fancy coverage, lots of camera work that's doesn't have a real personal stamp. That's why modern filmmakers that are still working in the auteur mode, have such a defining visual and emotional sensibility. Obviously, maybe it's not so obvious to you guys, but Quentin Tarantino would be one of them. If you saw any of his films, and if you saw his last film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's got Tarantino's stamp all over it. But he's a rarity, especially in America. You have to this week. I showed screened two foreign films for my pleasure, called Parasite from South Korea, and that won the Academy Award, by the way, from for Best Picture. And the gentleman who directed it had directed another film that was hugely a unique and individual called Snowpiercer. I highly recommend you guys seek these films out. You'll like them. They're very Western in their approach. Yes, they're speaking in a foreign language, and yes, you have to read subtitles. Not Snowpiercer, that's in English. But their newest one is, and maybe you've heard about it, it's about the family who is very poor, down and out family, and they sort of ingratiate themselves into a wealthy family and under false pretenses, and they sort of take over their entire lives, and bad stuff happens. It's a dark comedy, and if you don't know what that means, watch Fargo or any of the Coen brothers. Dark comedies, black comedies, usually means it's comedy with some terror thrown in, and that's what makes it funny. And this movie is very funny, very smart, and has some terrifying moments. Then the other film I watched was called Pain and Glory by the great Pedro Modovar, who is a Spanish director who has such a personal visual stamp. You end up following all his films. You look forward to the next one. And this one was nominated for an Oscar. Antonio Banderas, the lead actor, was nominated for Best Actor. And it's a sublime story about a filmmaker who's lost his way. He's hitting a certain time in his age, around 60 or though. His body is giving out on him. He's full of aches and pains. He's had surgeries on his back. He is not a happy camper. He's living alone in a very cool, groovy place in Madrid. And he's essentially cut off the world. He feels that he's lost because he's only a vital human being if he's making a film. And he's not making film, so he's not vital anymore. In the meantime, a festival wants to show one of his older films that became a phenomenon 30 years before. And he doesn't want any part to do with it, but they want him to show up, and they want maybe some of the performers to show up, and he has to contact his former lead actor, which he hasn't seen in many, many years. They had a major falling out because they're two different guys. They're two different characters, but they needed each other to make this successful film. Well, they get in contact with each other, and they're still different guys, but they're not so different anymore. You got to watch the film. They're not as different as they thought they were, and they see that they need each other. And because I love films about filmmakers, I really loved it. Yes, it's in Spanish subtitles. That's auteur work in capital A. You don't see it so much in Hollywood. When you have a $200 million budget, it's hard to put your personal stamp on it. People like Martin Scorsese still put the personal stamp on it. And it's not easy, but he's an old master, and they need to let him do what he needs to do. But the young people that are coming up in the ranks better learn how to make movies that look exactly like everybody else's, essentially. And so, but the auteurs took over Hollywood in the late 60s, early 70s. And we'll be talking about the 70s. This documentary you're going to look at covers the 60s. It covers about a 10-year period from Easy Rider, which is 1969, to Raging Bull, which is about 1979. And so that's the period it covers. How the young filmmakers coming out of college, people like Steve Spielberg, George Lucas, Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, John Milius, Peter Bogdanovich, Bob Rafelson, sort of stormed the gates with their independent minds and ways of doing things. Robert Altman's another great example. Hal Ashby, these are These are the creme of the last of the golden age of Hollywood. And they had a singular vision, and it was their vision. And because they each made a movie that made money, Robert Altman made MASH, made a lot of money. Bob Rafelson produced The Monkees, folks, the TV series, and that made a lot of money. So he got to make his movies. Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper came in and made, they had been struggling B actors for many years in biker films, Roger Corman films, who I talked about earlier. And they made Easy Rider for very little money, 400 grand or so. And it went on to make $100 million. When Hollywood sees that what your vision can do for them financially, they will come knocking at your door. And so for the next 10 years, they let the auteur film directors in the door. Sort of, they came in the back way, and the old movie tycoons didn't understand them. There's still a few alive. Jack Warner was one of them. They didn't understand this new way. They didn't understand that these new directors were the same age as the people that wanted to see these films, and their style spoke directly to a youth audience. And so for the first time in the history of this country, history of Hollywood, I should say, these filmmakers had a viewing audience that was roughly the same age they were. And it was all based, it came out, I've told you, you saw it earlier in my other lecture, and you'll see it on this documentary. It came out of rock and roll. It came out of the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, Woodstock, the whole bit. And that's the sensibility. And people are they're rejecting their parents' way of life. They're no longer drinking martinis. They are rolling joints. They are expanding their visions of the world. And they're led by cultural icons like John Lennon and Jimi Hendrix and so many more, Bob Dylan. And they wanted to emulate them, to see what it was all about. The Doors, the rock band The Doors, was a great one that opened the doors of perception. We were seeking a new way of doing things, a new way of thinking, a new way of envisioning the world. We didn't want to inherit our parents' world. We wanted to create a new world. Yes, kind of an utopian world. That's what the whole hippie thing was all about. It failed. We know that. Peace and love did not prevail. Boy, did not prevail. But in the meantime, it wasn't a bad idea. So what you're going to do is watch this documentary. I'll post it on the assignments, and it's called Easy Rider, Raging Bulls. It's about 2 hours long, and watch the whole thing. Take notes, folks. Pay attention, because there's going to be about 5 essay questions, short ones, based on this, as a quiz based on this documentary. And it'll be worth the same amount as as one of your essay papers they've been writing all along. And so the things I want you to pay attention to is the key to this documentary, and actually the key to this whole course is not just to look at Hollywood movies and see how they were done, and it's how the culture is changed by the movies or not, and how the culture helps change Hollywood or not. And just to give you an example, if you don't think a bunch of pandemic movies are being developed right now, or TV series, think again. We're going to see a slew of them. Can we go out and make them right now? No. Hollywood is shut down. They can't even get together. So this is in the near future. You'll start seeing pandemic films. In the meantime, they're re-showing this stuff on Netflix, like Contagion and The Stand, and other films that have already been made many years ago about viruses that are killing everybody. So there's a really good one from about 1970 called The Andromeda Strain, written by the same guy who wrote Jurassic Park, Crichton, and Michael Crichton. And and it's about a germ that gets loose and kills everybody in this town, and these people have to come in and investigate what the hell happened. And this is 1970, folks, 50 years ago. We've been waiting for the germs to get us for many years, since they started germ warfare in World War One, and with mustard gas. And we've been waiting for it to come our way. And guess what? Here, we're not in a war with anybody who's spraying it on us. At least we don't think we are yet. It's here already. The germ warfare is here, and we're all affected by it. And it's insidious. And we're going to see a lot of films, novels, music, everything is going to be reflecting on this. We're all, you reflect on the times. Art reflects on the times. So that's what you're going to look for in this movie. What's going on in the historical context of the world of 1968, 69, 70? What's going on? This documentary will depict that. What's going on? Why is Hollywood failing? This documentary predicts that. Essentially, it's what I talked about the other day, that the Hollywood establishment does not know how to make movies that the youth audience, the drive-in audience, the hipster audience can relate to. No, it's not the virus. Anyway, so watch the movie. It's going to be a quiz. I'll post it on the assignments. Make sure you pay attention. I'll post this lecture on the announcements today. And then I'm going to do another lecture. The class has changed. Everything's changed right now. And we're going off the formula. We're going off the status quo. We're going off the syllabus. And this class is, we'd meet twice a week, right, for 75 minutes. Well, I'm not talking for 75 straight minutes, but essentially I could. And so I am going to have more than 2 lectures during the week. I'll have maybe 3 or 4 because we got a lot of material to go through. You're not necessarily going to be tested on it or have to write papers on it, but I want to give you guys a lot of history and context now that I have you captive in your homes on the internet. So here's the thing. People are giving me emails. They're panicked over what to do, how to do this thing. It's all a work in progress. We're all working on it. But little by little, I'll post these things. You check your announcements all the time, daily. Just for a 5-minute check. You don't see anything, move on. You don't see an assignment, move on. Keep reading the book. Believe it or not, the book will help. The book will help in your text. In fact, the book, this stuff would be covered in, let me see what the chapter is. It's the seismic, they called it the seismic change in cinema. Beyond the new wave into new modernism. And everything we've done up until now, and it's chapter, hold on, I'm almost there. What chapter is this? Chapter 9. No, look at chapter 8 instead. Chapter 8. Chapter 9 starts in 1979 and goes to 1990, so it's a little too ahead of us. Keep reading the chapter. Keep looking for my announcements. I'll post all this stuff today, and I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're not out and about and being an idiot in this thing and not thinking it exists. It exists. It's no longer a hoax. It never was, folks. Stay healthy, stay isolated, watch movies. That's all we could do right now, right? Maybe it's time to write your book that you've been wanting to write. Maybe it's time to do one of your paintings like that. Of course, you got to be pretty advanced to do something like that. And maybe it's just time to think and to be alone in our thoughts. We can't go off to the mall. We can't distract ourselves. This is a great time to focus. If you can't focus through this, we're lost. And maybe we're lost. I'm not. I don't believe you are. We've got some life left unto us, and we've got things to do. So I'm going to cut this off in 4 seconds. with my great ending I always do. Stay tuned for the next lecture when the story of film continues. Adios.